So that being said, tonight is a very special night. It's my 2-year wedding anniversary with my wife, and I wanted to talk to you guys about marriage. So I want to share my thoughts on how to develop a godly and fun marriage that stands the test of time. One that gets better every day, one that fills you with joy and with peace. So, guys, if you're married, if you are engaged, if you're divorced, whatever, pay attention because I'm going to keep this super brief. But I'm going to go through like 4 or 5 different things that you can do, implement into your relationship that are going to make it better, that's going to make it more enjoyable, and that's going to help it to be able to grow into a great relationship that is going to get better and better as time goes on, as opposed to deteriorating as time goes on. So I'll start by saying that I'm only sharing my opinion on this matter. So take what you agree with, throw out the rest. But let me explain something right here. Marriage is just like everything else, they operate by spiritual principles. The law of confession and the law of sowing and reaping have major implications on relationships. I want to encourage you to evaluate your relationship constantly through the lens of the Spirit. Ask questions like, what seeds am I sowing into my relationship? And what harvest are they producing? What is my confession over my relationship? And is that supporting the marriage that I want? I see this more often than not, as much as I hate to admit it, but people don't think about the impact of the words and their actions, especially when it comes to their spouse. Before we got married, and before I read that, I'll just give you an example of some of the stuff that people say, that I hear people say, like, oh, my wife, she's crazy, or she's a you know what, you know what I mean? Or, I hate this about my wife, or, this, like, do not do that. Do not speak against your spouse, whether it's in a joking manner, whether it's in a serious manner. Do not do that. It is employing the law of confession, and it is also a terrible seed. It's going to reap a terrible harvest. So do not do that. Um, Now, before we got married, my wife was talking to a friend of ours who'd been married for like over 10 years. And this person told them to enjoy it while it lasts. Before you know it, you guys won't even speak to each other. Can you believe that? Can you believe that somebody literally, we're about to get married, and somebody told my wife that she was, being the sweet, kind-hearted person that she is, my wife, she just nodded and she changed the subject. But later she told me when she heard that her spirit like immediately rejected it. And I want to encourage you guys in this. Your relationship is your relationship. You will have whatever you say over it, and the seeds that you sow into that relationship, good or bad, will bear fruit. So clearly, this woman, she didn't even realize it, but she had a bad confession about her marriage, and it actually colored the way that she thought about every other marriage, despite contradictory evidence, because she knows of, couples that have been married for 30 and 50 years and had great relationships, but she still thought that way because that was her experience. So, my parents, for example, have been married for 30 years. They're a wonderful example of what a healthy marriage is supposed to look like. I had a great blessing to be able to study them over the years and learn the way that they treat each other. But watching people succeed does not benefit you if you don't take action. I'll share a few things that they've taught me, along with some other things that I learned along the way. But before I get into those, let me just say this. Not every relationship is the same, and what's worked for me may not work for you. But I can tell you that the first step to having a relationship filled with joy and romance is setting an intention for the relationship that you want. If you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. So many people get married because they think that that's just what you do. You have a wedding, you go on a honeymoon, and that's it. But nothing could be further from the truth. So I'm going to break this down into just a couple of different sections. I'm not going to go too deep on any of these, but I'll share some of the points that I think are important. So we'll talk about faith. Making God a priority in your relationship is a way of employing the first fruits concept in your marriage. Now, we talk about this a lot. This could be as simple as going to church together. Like, guys, especially if you have not been really putting God in your relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, it's time for us to know better and do better. There's not, we can't make excuses for why we're not doing the right stuff. At the end of the day, they're just excuses. Like, figure it out, like, do the right stuff. So, making God a priority is a very simple thing to do. You can start just by going to church. Like, you don't have to talk about God. You can literally just go to church. But as you begin to go to church, you'll see that it will begin to develop. The seed of your relationship with God and in your marriage is going to begin to grow by that act, that demonstration of faith. So going to church, very simple way to put God into your relationship, like literally this week. Marriage is a partnership. Holding each other accountable to the things of God is what powerful Christian couples do. If my wife takes me to church in the beginning of our relationship, if she hadn't done that, this group would never have been started. All right. So even to this day, she holds me accountable in my faith, and she's constantly guarding me to make sure that I'm living a life aligned with God's word. This is such a big part of having a godly relationship. Honor God in your relationship. If this isn't something that you currently do, I highly recommend onboarding it. Going to church on Sunday as a couple is a demonstration of your honor and your devotion to God. This might seem like a simple thing, it's not that important, but nothing could be further from the truth. Don't let serving God be an afterthought. Nothing is more important than putting yourselves in a place where you can hear from God together. God speaks to me and my wife every Sunday. Make sure you're in a place to hear. Moving on, we're going to go to intention. Before we got married, I got very intentional about the relationship that I wanted to have, about the man that I needed to be in order to be qualified for the woman that I want to have. I made a list about 30 things. I don't know, I filled up a whole page. I made a list of 30 things that I needed to change or to improve in order to be that man. From physical things like whitening my teeth to character things like being honest about and overcoming lust. I really took a long time to figure this out. But, if my wife was perfect in every area, what would the man who she deserves that, like, what would that guy look like? How would he behave? What would he do for her? These were like the questions. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what that looked like. And there's always things that will get in the way. It's easy to do this when you don't have kids, right? I'll admit it. But anything that's worth doing takes sacrifice. And there's always things that are going to get in the way of what's really important. So taking time to think about what's important and then following it up with action is so crucial that I can't overstate it. When I finished that list, I got to work. And by the time we got married, I was nowhere near the man that was described on that page. But as the years have gone by, I haven't given up on becoming that man. And one thing that will keep your relationship alive and actually make it better uh, is effort. It's going to get better and better as time goes on if you continue to put in the effort. And before we go on to the next section, it's really easy to fall into um, complacency. We get comfortable. It's like I go to work, and I get home and I'm tired and I have barely enough time to get cleaned up and do whatever, put the kids to bed, do whatever I got to do. Maybe watch a little bit of TV before I go to bed and just rinse and repeat. So it's really difficult for us not to fall into a rhythm of just checking off days without being in the driver's seat of our lives. And, this is something that I've seen happen in so many people's lives that I've been guilty of doing the same thing, where you get into a relationship and all of a sudden you start gaining weight and all of a sudden you stop doing the stuff that you used to do when you were single, you stop working on yourself. And that was something that, when my wife and I, we first got together, is we were both very independent people. We both worked two jobs, we both worked out, we both had friends and did different things. So, it was very hard for us to even get on the same schedule in the beginning stages of our relationship because we were both we'd both been single for a long time. And we were both working on ourselves. We were doing our own thing. And what was great was that even when we got together, we both continued to work on ourselves. And that's what we're going to talk about right now is you if you want your relationship to grow, that means that you have to grow. You can't be like, oh, well, my partner's not growing, and therefore I'm going to go ahead and ease off of the gas. It's like when you put effort into yourself, they will see you putting the effort into yourself and they will put effort into their selves. And it goes further than that because well let me read the section and we'll go from there. So intention will get you nowhere without effort. Making that list alone took effort. All right. It literally took me like 2 hours. I mean, which doesn't sound like a lot of time when you say it out loud, but sit in the same chair for 2 hours and think about one topic and don't get up until it takes it feels like forever when you're doing it. But it took me 2 hours, but it took effort to make that list. But the work that was involved in it and becoming that man was the real challenge. And it may be hard to take daily action to improve yourself and to improve your marriage, but the more effort that you put in, the better it will get, right? Relationships are like gardens. If you water them, they will blossom, they will grow. But if you don't, they will wither, they will die. So many people don't water their gardens. They wind up miserable or divorced. And it's the little things that compound. Let her pick the movie, do the laundry, wash the dishes, clean the house, bring her food that she likes, bring her flowers, write her letters, take her on dates. Marriage is not the end, it is just the beginning. Don't let yourself go. Start working harder on yourself now than you ever have. She'll notice. And guess what? She'll do the same when she sees you working to make her life easier, to make yourself more attractive. She's going to do the same. She'll start making your life easier. She'll start making herself more attractive. This is something that is so simple that most people won't do it. But our number one priority after serving God is serving our wives. The more effort that you sow, the more of a harvest you will reap. And that harvest is well worth more than any other harvest. And honestly, I feel like I did a pretty good job of covering this topic. But guys, effort, like very, very important. Just, marriage is not the end, it's just the beginning. You got to start grinding now harder than you ever have because, this is like, this is the playoffs, right? I mean, when you're dating and everything, it's like the regular season. But then once you get in the playoffs, boy, now you're in it. Now you're in it. It's sudden death. You got to win. You got to win every day. You got to win in your relationship. So, um, this is going to be a fun one. Sex. Yes, I said it, sex. For a lot of you, I don't have to emphasize the importance of this one, but something that is a critical part of prospering your relationship is sex. When you're warming things up by making her dinner and bringing her gifts, sending her sweet messages to brighten up her day, you're building momentum that can lead you right to the bedroom. Some of the marriages that don't have sex regularly turn into more of a friendship than a marriage. While your wife ought to be your best friend, the romance in the relationship is one of the major keys to a healthy marriage. There's no right or wrong answer on how often, but as often as you can. Much like the previous sections, intention and effort in this area will yield a fantastic result. Keeping things fresh in the bedroom will allow this area of your life to be just as rewarding as the others, if not more. I mean, shoot, come on now. Uh, I'm not going to get into too much detail on this topic, but men and women were designed to have
So
sex for a reason. What?
please do. No, no, elaborate.
um, okay. Well, let me get through the section first. Um, So yeah, I'll go into a little bit of detail in a second, but men and women were designed to have sex for a reason. All right, we were designed to have sex with our life partner, and if you feel like that spark is starting to dim in your relationship, recapturing that flame is an essential part of maximizing the joy and connection in your relationship. So If you're maybe you've been married for a couple of years, maybe things are starting to kind of fizzle out a little bit. Dude, go down to the adult store and go pick up something for your wife to wear. Like you have to take charge of your relationship. So, like, if you feel like your sex life is starting to dwindle a little bit, like you get in the driver's seat and you ramp that thing back up. If anything, just read a book. Go get some books or like go on some Reddit threads or something like that. But like literally just intention plus effort is really going to serve you in these areas. So do not allow your sex life to start to dwindle. Like that is one of the major keys to having a healthy relationship. So, um, now let's talk about finances. So, simply put, the biggest reason that couples get into disagreements is over money. And I'm going to say that one more time. Simply put, the biggest reason that couples get into disagreements is over money. This is a topic that is challenging. It's a challenging one to address, but I'll do my best. Don't argue about money. Just don't do it. Don't argue about money. If you start talking about a financial decision or you're in disagreement about finances or anything, any disagreement, just take a break. Come back to it. Don't allow disagreements to turn into arguments. This can be a topic that easily escalates into a heated debate, but I encourage you to take steps to prevent this. For starters, make a decision that you will not argue over money. Over the past couple of years, even before we got married, there were some times that my wife and I we would get into disagreements over money. But I was blessed to have grown up in a household where they taught me that arguing over money was a really bad thing to do. And I didn't even understand it when I was growing up. It just seemed like, just something that they would talk about a lot. They would just be like, because my parents they would teach marriage conferences, and they would talk about it at church a lot, and they would always say that was like a really big thing was don't argue about money. And then once I started getting into disagreements about money with my partner, I realized, wow, this is like this is something that the devil uses to get you into strife. And where envy and strife is, there's every form of evil. So you want to be very cautious about anything that begins to open the door to strife, right? um, so this can be a challenge when things get tight, financially speaking. Despite what you may think, my wife and I have had some tough times in our finances over the past couple of years. I mean, being behind on rent, not being able to pay our electric bill, having our power shut off, like, all the things you can imagine, like, we've gone through it. And when I was starting my business, it was hard to make ends meet. And a lot of times I put my wife in a tough spot, but we purpose in our hearts not to let those things get between us. And I want to make sure I cover this completely. I'm not saying don't talk about money, right? That this is another point that you have to be in sync about your finances. You have to be in sync about your responsibilities and your obligations, whether you're a one income household or a two income household. You guys we got to get on the same page. It's gonna allow you guys not to be able to enter into strife over it. So the last thing is we'll talk about goals here for a second. So I'll say it again. If you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. And I'm not saying that you have to have a family vision board, but having family goals is a great seed toward having the future that you want. This goes for every area of your lives, but especially marriage. Sitting down separately and asking yourselves, what do I want out of it? Where do I see myself in 5 years? And then coming together to see how these things fit together is a really great way of aligning your family vision. It gives you both clarity on what drives the other person, and it gives you guys an idea how you guys can support each other. I also recommend doing this with your finances, just determining where you are, what are your family financial goals, and what are the steps that are necessary to achieve them. And this again gives you an opportunity to get on the same page about a topic that prevents a lot of people from being in peace. It prevents a lot of potential strife when you guys get on the same page here and you begin to hold each other accountable. So I got a couple verses here that I'll share. Um, in Proverbs 18:21, it says, "Death and life is in the power of the tongue, They that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. And the next verse says, he who finds a wife finds good and obtains favor from the Lord. So, marriage is not the end, guys. Marriage is the beginning of a journey of 1,000 miles. Make sure that you're taking the right steps. Just to as a side note, your marriage is probably going to be the majority of your life. You're probably going to spend more time married with your wife than you're going to have spent in your previous life before you met them and when you were single. So, this is just the beginning. And don't speak death over it. Like, don't speak death over your marriage. Don't say things like, "Oh, my old lady is such a you know what," and we used to do, insert whatever all the time. We don't do it anymore. Make a strong declaration over your partner. My wife gets hotter every day. Our family walks in prosperity. My wife is the most fun person to be around. She's my best friend. Just have a positive confession about your wife. And whether you feel this way or not doesn't really matter. Just because what you're saying might not be true today doesn't mean that it won't be after you've declared it for 6 months straight. Guys, the years are going to pass either way, whether you take my advice or not, but inaction is an action. And if we don't drive our relationship forward, we will sit in the passenger seat and watch it fall apart one day at a time. Just like you don't notice your hair growing from day to day, our marriage can fall apart right in front of our eyes, and we don't even see it happening until it's too late. Water your gardens, boys. Watch God take over and bless your marriage and your lives, just like He's blessed mine. And guys, I'll just add a couple of other things too. Like on the topic of effort, like have things in place that are going to force you to put an effort into your relationship. Like, even if you have kids, like there's no excuse for you guys not to be able to leave the kids at your mom's house or your dad's house for a couple hours, or go and go to the you can get a gym membership just to use the daycare service, or something. Like, you can find some way to get creative and get rid of those kids for a couple hours so you and your wife can have a date. That was something that my parents really did. When we were young, they always did it. They always had a date night, and that's something that I've carried over into my relationship. And even if even if we don't get dressed up, even if we just like we scrub it, we get off work at 6 or 7 o'clock, and we just jump in the car and go down and get something to eat. It's we still have date night every Friday night, and sometimes it's hard to get there and to make that work, but that is like one thing in my calendar that is a non-negotiable, is that we always have our date night. If we miss it, then we make it up. But it's setting a precedent that that we're still dating, like we're still going to put in the effort in this relationship, and that's the way that it needs to be. We need to continue to push the envelope and stuff. And now, so obviously it's our anniversary, and I'm trying to get creative about, well, like, what are the things that I can do just to bless her today. And that's how we should go about every day, really trying to make our partners' lives easier, because just like we talked about, it's reciprocity. When you begin to make their lives easier, they begin to make your lives easier as well. It's when they see you growing in certain areas, it causes them to want to grow in a similar fashion. So, yeah, anyway, we're through the notes here. I'll be happy to share these notes with you guys so that you can look back on them. But yeah, just feel free to unmute yourselves. I'd love to hear some of your guys' thoughts about this stuff.
Well, I appreciate a lot what you shared. Definitely a lot of prep for me, the things I can be thinking of as I, approach marriage. One thing that just kind of pops in my head that I wanted to, remind you guys about, I know I'm not married yet, but one thing I have recognized is, the amount of time that you spend with, your partner, ideally, in a marriage. Um, Aside from God, and honestly, in some cases, even before God, though it shouldn't be this case, but aside from God, you're going to be the number one influence in your wife's life. So if you want to see something different, in their life, it's very, I'd say there's a very high percentage that it's going to be influenced by actions that you take. And
Yes.
just as an example, I've seen in my when I got together with my fiance, she was when we first started going out, she was completely, I'm not saying she's not now, but she was like way more on fire for God than I was, and she brought that influence on me, which was really good because I needed it at the time. But unfortunately, I don't know, I think it was maybe about 6 months or a year in, the influence started shifting the other way where, I was kind of shifting her to be more complacent, just, and you could blame it, okay, I'm busy with school, okay, I'm busy with work, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I recognize that now that I was not shifting and influencing her in the right way. And you can always say, okay, well, we both make these choices and we both make these decisions. But as the man, it is our responsibility, especially under God, that we need to focus and direct our relationships. So if we're seeing something in our partner's life or, spouse's life, and it's just not what we want to see, it's probably a good idea to take a look at what am I doing to influence this situation, and how can I be the best influence in this person's life, and I know that there's definitely a period where you can always have an excuse of something to blame it on, but we want to be going better upward, both in our own lives. And yes, you want to be encouraging your wife, and the easiest way to encourage your wife to excel is to also excel in your own personal life, whether it be fitness or your pursuits, or your relationship with God. Because I know for a fact, if I'm sitting here on my phone scrolling and she busts out a Bible, and just starts reading the word. Maybe not every single time, or if I'm like, maybe I'm dead asleep. Okay, there's some exceptions, but there's a fair percentage of times. And if she's busting out the Bible every single day, I'm gonna start busting out the Bible too, because I'm not gonna be like just sitting here scrolling on my phone while she's, and it's exactly the same other situation, or if you're sitting there and you're like, all right, I'm going to bust out this Bible, pray with me. Let's read these scriptures. Maybe our flesh isn't going to want to do that, right immediately. But if someone else is there encouraging you to take those actions or nudging you along, um, you're going to start to see some results. And I've noticed, especially, the past few weeks as we've been trying to make better decisions, that literally just having one person, if two people are like complacent about an issue, then it's not going to be done. But at least if one person's complacent but the other person's like, all right, we need to make a step in the right direction, then something's probably going to get happen. So I'm not saying you always need to be on point 100% of the time, but like you need to be able to lift the other person up when they're slipping or struggling a little bit, and then a little bit back and forth. We all have tough weeks, we all have tough months or periods where we get into a tough rut. But there should be someone in the relationship should always be, you know, picking the other person up, and it can't be like one sided where she's always lifting up me up and she's my rock, and I'm doing nothing for her. It's got to be some give and take. And I know I have far less experience about this than less, but that's what I've seen in our relationship the past few months as we've been trying to uh, improve on things.
Yeah, you make a really good point, man, because that's the truth. I mean, at the end of the day, we set the pace in our relationships. The Bible says that the man is the head of the household. And even if you have a strong woman beside you who maybe sometimes you feel like she's setting the pace, when you start doing this kind of stuff, you will begin to see that, they don't feel comfortable scrolling on their phones when you're sitting there reading the Bible, and when we are making these changes, then all of a sudden it will cause them to be, oh, okay, like I don't feel right by doing this. Let me come under and do that. But that's, my wife and I, like, we were partners in crime, dude. Like, we would literally like get together and just drink and watch movies and TV and just like do nothing, dude. And, eventually it got to the point where we just realized like, hey man, like, this we're not where we thought we would be by this point in our lives, and we got to start making some changes. And so when we started doing that, it was, we both had to look at each other and say, like we can't, like, because if I would backslide, then she would be like, you know what? Yeah, let's just backslide. And then if she would backslide, then I would be like, yeah, you know what? Let's just do it. So, there had to come a point where we're like, okay, we're not going to do these things anymore, and we're going to change the way that we live. We're going to change the way that we behave. And if one day, she decides that she wants to go and backslide, or I go and I want to backslide, now we hold each other accountable and say, no, 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 we don't do that stuff anymore. And it took a lot of time for us to really outgrow a lot of those things. And that's just the way that it is. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of attention, and not getting discouraged about, like Michael said, like, some weeks are going to be easier than others. Some days are going to be harder than others. But that's why it's a relationship. It's like a partnership. You have to both be pulling on the same side of the rope. Like in a tug of war, you can't be going back and forth. Everybody has to be pulling the same way. Jonathan, thanks for joining us, man. I hope that this was helpful for you, man.
Oh, it was very, I feel like God spoke to me, man. It was very, very, very deep, actually. So I really appreciate actually getting on the call today, for real.
Yes, bro. We're always glad to have you, man.
Really appreciate. When is the next one? Thursday?
Thursday, brother.
All right, for sure. I'll be on there.
All right, man. I'll hit you up.
All right, man. Take care. Bye, guys.
Good having you, brother.
Yeah, Mike, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I like the analogy too of like, you don't see your hair growing, but if you don't look in the mirror for a month, your hair is gonna you'll be able to see the difference between how much your hair is growing. And the same thing with your habits. You don't realize how these little changes all start to compound. Like there's this book, I got this book right here. It's called The Compound Effect. It's a great, great book, but it talks about these two examples. And like one of the guys like eats an extra whatever it is, eats an extra 1,000 calories a day, and the other guy starts eating like 500 calories less a day. I think it was 500. So one guy's eating 500 calories more every day, one guy's eating 500 calories less every day. And over the first year, like not much really changes. But like that second year, all of a sudden that one guy has lost a little weight, the guy that was eating less, and the guy that was eating a little bit more, he's starting to look a little pudgy. Then 3 years down the road, all of a sudden, this other dude's like crazy shredded, and the other dude's, just a chunky monkey. And so it just really illustrates the point that just like, little changes over extended periods of time, you don't realize them at first, and you don't even really see it for sometimes a year or 2 years. But then eventually, all of a sudden, you really start to see the consequences of your actions. And it's a great book. But yeah, that's a really, really great thing, Michael, because you guys are still fairly early in the relationship. I feel like Leslie and I are also very early in the relationship. It's good to get in front of these things. You don't want to be 5 years down the road and then all of a sudden you realize that, you guys have a whole bunch of bad habits that you've been having for years, and it's a lot harder to change course at that point.
Amen.
Well, I'd love to
We
stay
love
on with you guys, but I should probably run in a second. Did you
we
got
love
Mike?
you.
Do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, no, I appreciate the word that you shared tonight. Very thankful for you as always. And I guess it's probably for the best that you didn't dive into all the details of how you were sparking things up in the bedroom. But it's just, did you stop recording?